Like there pops up. Ooh, a couple people waiting. I'm so excited.
Yay.
Come on.
I have it pulled up on my iPad over here.
Right. Something that's weird is like, okay, YouTube still like gives you ads on your own thing. I wish that's something that they changed. But okay, I think we should be good. Can you see us? Let's wait for someone to check in. But hi everyone, welcome to Historical Romance Hangout. We have Bree from In Love and Words with us today. Thanks, Bree. Well, not as frequent as I would like, but a frequent guest of my channel because she's one of my favorites. So happy to have you.
Yeah.
This chat just kind of came around because once a month I do, which you've been a guest on before, where we break down a specific historical romance. And this month, like not a lot of people chose to read the one, Hey Bex, which I understand just because it was kind of in the middle of the series, but it was one that I specifically needed to get read. And that's how I picked the poll that month is I was like, I need to finish these specific books, so pick one for me. And only like 3 people read it. So I was like, well, let's just talk about romance, historical romance in general.
Yeah.
Yeah. And since you're one of my friends on here who, I mean, I know you said you're a little bit newer to that, which we're going to talk about. But I already have a book club with one of my other friends who likes it. So I was like, we'll start with,
well, I think it's good to get point of views from someone who's a little bit newer and then someone who's been in the game for a while. So
Right. So that's where like I just want to start tonight is kind of first just with like your romance journey in general, like when you started and what you started reading, and then we'll go into some of the other questions that I sent and everything.
So I have been like a reader my entire life. My mom is a big reader. My sisters are too. So it's been in my family for a long time. I grew up watching my mom like sitting on the couch with a book all the time. And I've always been surrounded by them. But when I first started reading, I was more reading like Babysitter's Club or Babysitter's Little Sister and Goosebumps. And I actually liked horror the most. And as I graduated from like Goosebumps to like Fear Street by R.L. Stine, the Fear Street novels had a couple of like boyfriend-girlfriend kind of relationships. And I found that those were my favorite parts. And then I remember going to the library once and just seeing this whole section of like YA romance. And I think the first series that I read that was romance was just called like Love Stories. And I just remember they had white covers. I don't remember anything else about them, but I read every freaking single one of them. There was like 40 there. I read them all. And then from there, I just like kept picking up romances and mostly contemporary. And then like when the Twilight craze came around, I started reading a lot of paranormal romances. And then my first adult romance I've talked about on my channel is Jacob from The Nightwalkers by Jacqueline Frank, which I just read a couple of weeks ago for the Paranormal Romance Readathon. And I freaking still love it. I've read it so many times, but I love it more every time I read it.
I love when that happens. I'm so afraid of rereading some favorites because I don't know if I'm past it, but I mean, my childhood favorite, I still read it every year and I still love it every year. So that definitely can happen. But some of them I'm like, I don't think I could revisit this. Like
it's rare that they hold up, but the storyline for Nightwalkers is just so good. Like how the story progresses throughout each book, even though it follows different couples every time, the like underlying storyline is just really, really interesting. And the whole world.
Nice. That's fun. So then transitioning over to when did you read your first historical romance and what was it?
So, oh gosh, when did I read it? So my mom and my sister love historical romances. They love Regency romances. And they had read them for years and I just never really got into them. Not really sure why. But gosh, how long ago was it? It was probably, I read my first one maybe like 5 or 6 years ago. And it was Compromised by Kate Noble. I do not remember anything about that book, but I do remember really liking it. And then I didn't read another one until like fairly recently, until like a couple years ago. I think the first historical romance readathon that Jess and Lacey and Lisa put together.
Okay.
That was like the last. Then I started reading them more and more.
Okay.
And now I read like a few a month. I still read mostly contemporary, but I have incorporated a few more lately.
What was the one that like restarted it? What'd you read for that one? That's what kind of restarted your like newer book, right?
So the historical romance readathon, the first round that I participated in, I gave most of them like 3 stars. No, you know what it was? It was Stacey Reed something like
Oh,
the purple one, the one where the Duke was like injured, huh?
Is it the Daring Duke? The Duke is daring. I don't know. I haven't read
It might be. I can't remember. I just know that he had like a leg injury or something. I forget.
Okay.
Maybe someone in the comments knows. I can't remember.
Someone might know. Keep going.
Yeah. But yeah, that one was the one that made me realize that there are more out there that I like, because I always kind of felt meh about them. Even though I read that first one and liked it, I just was like, this isn't going to be something for me. But then once I read that one, I was like, oh, wait.
Right. Because you still got to find the right one in there for you. But
yeah, because it's such a huge, like, you think historical romance is, at least for those of us who read contemporary, you think it's kind of a small thing and they're all the same, but there's such a wide range of historical romances, which you talk about a lot, and you have a lot of really great rec videos. All the different ones.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of perfect. This kind of goes with it. I asked some people to ask questions, and some of them blend with what we said and some don't. So this one I want to go with, like, what's your favorite kind of historical, but also, like, what is your current, like, favorite one? That's one of the questions I sent you. But
so I like dark historicals.
Yeah.
I like Kerrigan Burns, the Victorian Rebel series. That's probably my favorite. And I like as far as tropes in them, I like a damaged hero, or like a scarred hero is always good.
That's awesome. Those are, I'm a big fan of those, obviously. So that's fun. Here's this one. I think I know the answer to this then too, but Boundless Book Owl wants to know which Highlander historicals have you read?
I mean, Outlander counts, right?
Yeah, it does.
That's true. Outlander was probably the one that
Tartan right behind.
Like, it's weird. I don't know why I don't always think of Outlander as a historical romance. For some reason, I always put it in a whole other category.
Right. I mean, the author would say differently, so I think that's why both people. But I mean, specifically the first one, it is a historical, and the romance is the main plot. So there's your answer, Diana. Take it.
Right. We've made the executive decision here.
Right.
Yeah, so in Victorian Rebels, I think it's the third book that was the Highlander. That one's a Highlander, and I love that one too. I
mean, they all are. So here's the thing, like Jennifer Ashley, hers are too, because her characters are Highlanders, even though they're not always at their, they're in London for that one. But I would consider them Highlander historicals too, because their history is very important to them. In fact, they kind of stick out like a sore thumb in society because they won't conform. They still wear their kilts all the time and stuff. So that's really nice.
And then The Secret too, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so I love that one.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm pretty sure when people say Highlander, they mean Scottish, because we don't really break the difference between like Highlander and Lowlander. And I think it pretty much has to do with the geography, but I don't break it apart. So say Highlander.
I don't know the difference.
Right. Well, I know this from Outlander, because there's Lowlanders who sided with the British and like Highlanders who like didn't. So that's the only reason that I know. But when people say Highlander historical, they usually mean, and then that there's tension between English and like British stuff happening.
Oh, okay.
But cool. I'm like getting distracted from things because I love that people are asking questions. So I'll ask, that's mine, and then I'll go through some of theirs. So what is one that you're looking to read next? Like, what are you excited? What's on your like TBR for historicals? What do you want to read?
Victorian Rebels. I want to finish that series. I think I have 3 more. I've read the first 3, and I think there's 3 more. So that's the one I'm most excited for, because I have given all 3 of the first ones 5 stars. I've loved them all.
4 more.
There's 4 more?
Yeah.
And Kerrigan Byrne also has, it's called Highland Magic. And it's like a Highlander romance, but there's like a magical element to it. And I bought I think there's like a bind up audiobook that has all of them in it. And I bought that recently. So I'm pretty excited about that one too. I haven't heard a lot of people talk about that one, but I like Kerrigan Byrne.
I want to work on reading some of her self-pub, because the thing that happens with Victorian Rebels is that the 7th book is actually a crossover book. So it has 2 covers. That one's about Carlton Morley, the 7th book. It's about them. And so it has A Dark and Stormy Night, and then it's also called Seducing a Stranger because it's going to be a spinoff, but then there's another one still that's part of the Victorian Rebels. So she made it a little confusing for us all. But that Seducing the Stranger leads off into her self-pub series that's going to be, it's about these 3 sisters. So
is that the good something?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So Seducing a Stranger, that's the first one in that series, but also the 7th one in that one. So I want to try reading more of her self-pub too, because I really liked A Dark and Stormy Night. I was a big fan. That one was fantastic. Really that whole series, I've said this, like there's only one that was slightly less than everything else, and it was still a good book. It just wasn't my trope. So it like didn't work for me. But do you have like, I mean, we were talking about this. Is she your favorite author? Is Kerrigan your favorite?
I think so. I think she's probably my favorite. But again, I haven't read enough to really say, but so far she's been my favorite.
Yeah, she's great. Look for romance.
Who's your favorite author?
Thanks for everyone showing up. We're getting some. See, historical romance, it is having its resurgence. And I'm so happy. Like, I'm so happy. So
I wouldn't have started reading it again if it wasn't for the resurgence and everyone posting on Instagram all their step backs and stuff.
Right. Like, I just kept mine so chill. But anytime I would do like, besides my after video, which is just popular because it's popular, my historical romance recommendation video is my most watched video, like to this day. And I made that one 2.5 years ago. And like, I hate looking at myself.
I know. Don't you hate when like your old videos are popular? I'm like, don't watch that.
It consistently gets great views monthly. And I'm like, guys, I've made better ones since then. Like, move along.
Move along.
But they don't. They want that one. And I'm like, all right, fine. But
who's your favorite historical romance author?
Geez, mine changes all the time. I mean, Kerrigan's my favorite right now, too.
Okay.
She's my favorite right now, too. But when I talk like in the grand scheme of it, like I haven't read all of Lisa's yet, but I really enjoy Lisa Kleypas. Because she also will have some hard-hitting plots. She just does them in a little more of a classical way than Kerrigan does. Because Kerrigan just like, screw that, I'm going to tell whatever kind of story I want. They're going to have all the traumas that I want. It's going to be a thing. But in my like lifelong historical life, it's going to be Julia Quinn because I've read every book at least 2 or 3 times, more in some case. And there's a book for every season for me with her. So I'm very hopeful that with the resurgence of Bridgerton and the TV show, that other people will try other of her books. Like I have some plans for like my channel of having like, hey, let's check out stuff that's not Bridgerton because there's some great stories in there that nobody's looked at yet. So
after reading that, I want to read more of hers because like I told you before we went live, like I like her storytelling. I thought it was funny and like tongue in cheek how she handled things. There probably will become another one that I really like, but I've only read like one by her so far. Yeah,
I need to finish her older stuff too because I've read all of the like newer things and she's also really good. There's so many. Like the most fun part of like the Step Back Saturdays for me has been finding just people I'm like, I have never heard of this woman. And I'm like, that's because there's a million authors out there besides the 5 that we talk about that I want to read them. But let's start. Okay, so those were kind of a few questions that were specific to you. And now I have some written down, but also people are throwing up some of the same questions I have. First, Crystal, you're the real
one. We love you.
Let's see. Here we go.
It's gonna look. I look like I'm drinking wine, but it's actually kombucha.
I have a dirty chai iced latte in front of me. So, okay, so this is perfect because it's our next question. So I'll pull up this one. But the way that I kind of want to twist this a little based on mine is, so first I want it to be like, what are our favorite historical romance tropes? And then, I mean, we can say our least favorite as well. We'll do that because, yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't like the super innocent, virginal, like kind of dumb heroine like that. That annoys me. And I think that's why I didn't read a lot of historical initially because I felt like every single heroine was going to be like that. And not just, it's okay if she's a virgin, like that's fine. But like, I don't like when they're like, what? Oh my goodness, what is that word? Like that just annoys me in general. So that's probably my least favorite.
So that's why Daphne was hard for you.
But she wasn't that annoying though. Like I don't know why. Like I can't put my finger on why she didn't annoy me as much. Yeah. There was a Mary Below one that there was a really annoying virgin heroine, but I can't remember what it was called. But so that's probably my least favorite.
Okay.
And then my favorite is, like I said, like a scarred hero, like a Beauty and the Beast type of thing.
That's good. That's good. I mean, my favorite, it's like really broad because I also love the torture, but I'm a big fan of specifically an arranged marriage that happens immediately in the story. I like when in historicals, the thing that I love and appreciate about them more than a contemporary, because arranged marriage and contemporary, there's reasons for it to happen too, it's fun, but I like watching a couple who we already know they're together. We're not having to weed out any other possibilities. We're getting married at the beginning and then trying to deal with our like struggles in a marriage, because to me that is a like real life struggle. Is okay, so you found your person, how are we going to live together? How are we going to work? So that's one of my favorite, but within that, there can be all the other tropes, because like an arranged marriage or a marriage of convenience is like the number one historical thing you're going to deal with, because what is the thing? So we can have sex, we need to be married, so let's get us married at this point of the story. Like, which I'm fine with. Like, I'm fine with it. I'm kind of traditional and like, let's do it. Let's bang. We need to be married. Okay. But then like my least favorite, it's so hard because as I'm learning, like I don't really have like least favorite tropes, because any trope can be done well in the right hands. But the one that I am least a fan of is the mistress trope. I've read quite a few of this recently. I don't know if you've read one of those yet.
I have.
But it's one where either we can't be together for reasons, or you're too far below me, so we can't be together for reasons. So let me set you up as my mistress. And I've read quite a few of those. And it never works for me, because it just makes the dude such an ass. Like, even if he has a perfect reason.
How do you come back from that?
Like, it's not even mistress like he's married to someone else. It's mistress of like,
you're just not good enough.
Have to marry someone else. Yeah, I'm going to have to marry someone else. So once you read one, I think you'll agree with me. Like I've seen it done okay a few times, but very rarely am I like, yay, I'm happy you just asked her to be our mistress.
Yeah, I'm always hesitant to label like least favorites, because there's always a book that can prove you wrong. I have things that like I'll avoid if I know that there's something in it, but sometimes it can be done really well. So.
Right. Like, because I've even read, like, the thing I think we'll all say, there's no one who's like, I love a cheating trope. Like, I love when a person's an unfaithful person. But I've read a couple ones where, like, the cheating worked in the story for me. But I'm not, like, doesn't mean the thing I always say is, like, there's a lot of things that happen in romances that I don't morally approve of it. But I still think it's hot. Like,
exactly.
So I'm like, let's not.
One of my favorites is a serial killer romance. I don't condone being a serial killer.
Right, like toxic. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, one of my favorite books from this year, like half of them involve assault in them. Like, I'm looking at the list, I'm like, I am a horrible person. What's a mind? Ruin, Untouchable, A Heart of Blood and Ashes. I'm like, why am I a sick, twisted bitch like this? So there you go. I mean, but there's just something about it. There's like higher stakes when we get into that. But so then the next question that I want to make kind of like a twist on that is, what are some tropes that don't translate from other subgenres into historical romance? Sorry, I can't say this.
Historical.
Yeah, because there's some that transfer well, right? Like sex romance, and still, like I said, marriage of convenience can work, or fake dating. Fake dating is a big one in historical, because there's actual like reasons to fake date someone that like aren't as, realistic in contemporary. I don't know. So
I don't know. I feel like almost anything can be translated. It's just like, you know, putting the historical twist on it.
Right. That's why.
I don't know, rock star romance. I guess you can't have a rock star.
It was more of a like philosophical question.
Yeah.
I was just thinking it because here's the thing for me. There's some that I like better if they are a historical than in a contemporary. Whereas like in a historical, I can't see them working. And that's one of them. Like Friends with Benefits doesn't work in historical for me. Like it's always going to go up in flames. Like the Duke and I, they make it one day. Right. We made it one day. Because you can't be like fake dating someone you're not going to marry in historical because you're like ruining people's reputations if you do that. I mean, Izzy, my thought is like a rock star version would be like royalty or like a high up. I
mean, I feel like any Duke type romance. Yeah.
Because we throw dukes around the time, but I think I put this in my historical video. There has only been 72 like dukes ever. And if you think about that, there has never been more than that amount of dukes. And just everyone's a duke because that's like we want the rich guy. We want that to happen. But so it's kind of like overdone to the point where we don't understand the significance of it. Of like if you're a duke, it literally means you are in the peerage. Like you are probably in line to the throne somehow. If
you're a rock star.
Right. Yeah. So the only thing with it, I love you, Shay, but you're not who I was grabbing. The only thing with this, Izzy, is that like theater people were really looked down on and you weren't considered something to uphold. So like you think of Millie in The Hunter, she is like considered a fallen woman because she wants to sing or act. So I just feel like it doesn't have the same connotation of being a rock star, whereas like a rock star is revered to some level. Like, yeah, there's some people who would turn up their nose to a rock star because we're like, ooh, sex, drugs, rock and roll, I don't want to deal with it. But like if you were someone on the stage, you were really trading your talent for like being respectable. Like you were not respectable.
And I'm translating it to more like a fame thing.
Right.
And to me, like royalty is more like the in historicals. Like
a princess or something. I don't know. It's interesting. But okay, so now we're
online romance won't work in historical.
Online romance, yes.
Yeah, a long distance romance. That's true.
That's true. I mean, there are still some epistolatory. Is that how you say that word? I feel like I'm always cussing when I say epistolatory, like writing letters.
Oh, that's true. I mean, what's that Tessa Dare one when the Scott ties the knot? She was writing letters to him. So I guess that could be considered.
To Sir Philip with Love will be an epistolatory romance when you get there, book number 5. There's also one in the Hathaway series, which I know you've read the first one, but I don't think you've read. Have you read the second one of that yet? Okay, just the first one. There's the last book in that one is a soldier and someone writing letters. So that like that's a lot easier to catfish someone with letters back then too. Like because you're not seeing people for years at a time. So if someone just switches who's writing the letter, like no one's gonna know.
And I think on your question you said vice versa too. So what works in historical but doesn't work in contemporary? And it's probably like the whole compromised thing doesn't translate quite as well. I mean, I'm sure there are ways that you can do it, but it's not as like high stakes.
Right. There are a couple contemporary where that still works if it is royal, because then I think if royalty only works, like the Nordic royal series, I think there's a situation of like compromise in that. But otherwise it's just like, who cares? No one can make you marry someone in a contemporary. But I would also say, like you said, I can definitely swallow a virgin heroine in historical, whereas in contemporary, a lot of times I like roll my eyes if it's a virgin in a contemporary, not because it's not possible, but because of like for someone to be so innocent in one. Like said about this, I read the like it was going to be such a good book because it was a, like it was a Scottish one. It was a curvy girl. And then she didn't even know how sex worked. And she was 32 years old.
This was contemporary?
Yes. It was called The Red Scot. And like this woman, she'd been almost assaulted when she was 18. And so since then she has like shunned men. Like literally she's terrified of them 10 years later.
Mm-hmm.
And her friends encourage her to like start getting self-defense and stuff, as well as she wants to start to desensitize herself by being around lots of men. So she starts going to the gym.
Mm-hmm. Going to the gym.
The guy who owns the gym, he's an MMA fighter, and he's the big burly Scotsman, super sexy. But because he has lots of muscles, she's terrified of him. And then anyway, whatever. Finally, we get to stuff going to happen, and she literally like doesn't even know how sex works. And I'm like, you are 32 years old. And I don't care if you were scared. Like, didn't you know about sex before that assault when you were 19? Like, didn't you know how it worked at all? And
like, unless they were in a cult or like sheltered in some way, I don't see how you could be that naive to it.
I'm not going to out her unless she's actually watching it. But one of my like friends online, she shared with me that there's a lot of things that she's learning about for the first time in romances because she was raised that way. But she still but she still knew how like basic sex worked.
Right.
She still knew the mechanics of the bare knuckle bones. It's okay if you don't know what pegging is or piercings that you can pierce a dick or something. It's fine if you know that. But you still knew about the P and the V, right? It doesn't know that. I don't know.
What is that thing in your pants?
Right, because I was raised a Christian too, and I still knew about that by the time I was 18. Like, I hadn't been as like nasty as I did until the last couple of years, but I still knew about everything.
Right.
I don't know. So that's a thing. Anyway, back to my original point. That's something that going the other direction, when that happens in a contemporary, I just don't buy it when there's someone who doesn't know anything at all. And the amount is like I can even buy that maybe a woman doesn't believe she can have an orgasm or doesn't know. Like I've seen that done, and that's usually, a really emotional thing to have in a book. But when she doesn't even know how it works, I'm like, I'm sorry, author, you've lost your credibility for me.
But you know what's funny? A little bit of a double standard is if it was reversed, I would like it. Like if the guy was like, what is happening? I feel like swoon.
So let's do the side juncture, because what's the one book we forgot to talk about?
Wait. Oh yeah, before this, I know, Love in the Wild. Can we pretend it's a historical?
Yes, we can totally talk about it. This is my channel. I don't care. They won't leave. They like this.
Oh, I am obsessed with that book, Love in the Wild by Emma Castle. You guys,
he's British. He doesn't remember that. It's historical, right? If they're British.
Sure, if they're British.
He is the sweetest, most precious little flower.
Sweet. Oh my God. It's like everything, like if you love a virgin hero for all the reasons why I love a virgin hero, which is the naivete and the innocence and stuff, who doesn't want to ruin an innocent man?
Oh, we want it.
I'm adding that to my book of quotes for you.
Oh, yeah. I love it. I totally agree. And the thing that, so I agree with people who say that it's a pretty simple story, because that's always a lot of people's like critique of it. But here's the thing, like it's exactly what I wanted from it. And it's still a little bit of action happening too.
It checked all the boxes. Like
it did. And it's not promising to be any more than that. Like he's just a swingy guy. And I like the opposite of, like, I like a man who just like will take what he wants in a book too, where you're like, whoa, slow down. And I also like the other way where they're like, no, I'm going to wait for you to tell me everything. And for a guy who's literally raised savage, I love how they showed like he'd seen it in the animal kingdom where they don't ask, but he was like, but I don't want to make her unhappy, so I'm just going to wait. And I'm like,
and then her trying to explain like dating and everything to him. He's like, so just like all the different steps. Right. He's like, okay, so we went on a date because we ate food together. So now
I can make with you.
Right. But he's still waited her. Oh, it's so cute.
Well, we'll try not to spoil shit. We're just eking because we're excited. But I mean, you can kind of guess just by the life that he's lived, there will be things he doesn't know. And of course, just great. So that's what I say. The thing I liked a little more about this one than I did Transcendence, which I love Transcendence.
I love Transcendence too, but I think I like this one a little, I don't know.
Right.
They're so different.
Here's my reasoning. Transcendence, amazing. Like, it's an experience for what it is. But the thing that's better about Thorn is that he has the same brain as our hero does. And he's not like Ed and Beth, like, they're never going to, like, they can never speak. Their entire lives together, they can never speak because his brain literally cannot. Whereas Thorn, like, he has rudimentary knowledge from childhood, as well as his brain can think and learn and grow when he needs her. So for me, it just felt less of like, if his brain had still been stuck young, it feels a little like pervy, even though it doesn't. It never feels like that in Transcendence. Right. But in this state, it being a contemporary, sorry, there. Right below me. We're okay.
I like how I jumped too.
I know. On my face. I'll have to watch it play back of that because I'm sure I was like, ugh. I live on the ground floor, so I get crickets and bugs sometimes because when it's cold, they start coming in. Anyway, like my heart come back. For a second. The thing I liked better is that he very quickly can like learn and engage and learns the way of things. So that, and he brings all that stuff from the animal kingdom of like respect of people and like such respect for life, but also still that like guttural manliness is still there. He's just so sweet at the same time. And like, it's great.
It's so good. And I you know, the other thing I was a little bit worried about with it was that she would be like stuck in the jungle with him and it'd be like this big dramatic thing, her trying to get out. And I like that there wasn't. Like she got out pretty easily and she wasn't like stuck there, because I don't like those survival type stories. They make me very anxious. Right. Because it's like terrifying to me to think about that. But it was very easy for her to get to that town and leave when she wanted.
Right. She just had to kind of convince him to take her.
Right.
Which he was willing to do. Like he was never, I'm going to keep you, which was so beautiful. It was, I love that even more because, yeah.
Yeah. For him to like, for someone who's like, she is mine, she's my mate, but then to respect like her needs, that's really great.
Right. I know he's cool.
And did you see at the end that she's writing a labyrinth like romance?
I did see that.
I'm like, give me that romance.
There's something else in that list too. I have to look at my book. There's something else I was excited for too. But I loved it. It was great. I understand of like, there was a lot of other stuff that tried to get put into that book because she told like a whole arc of his. So I understand people of like, well, that part of it moved too quickly. That's a her. But like, I don't know. It worked for me.
And I was only there for the romance. So I was like, okay, that stuff's great now, but...
Same. I don't care about his family. Like, oh, okay. I can't. I'll have to say it afterwards because now I need to stop because
for people.
We'll mention it afterwards. Okay. Here's a good one. What historical did you read because of the hype?
Like all of them that I've read is because of the hype.
Reread them all because of the hype.
Because that's how I choose. I don't know. I didn't know where to start, so I kind of just went by the hype. Like I think the number one is probably The Highwaymen. I read that one because so many people loved it. And I was like, see, here's the thing. I tend to read books because of the hype, because I tend to like books that are hyped. Like, I'm not one of those people who's like, oh, it has a lot of hype. I won't like it. I usually like it. I'm a sheep, I guess. Because all the
5 stars she put up on Twitter today. I saw her like all the books. I was like, oh, they're all 5 stars. I love it.
No shame in my game.
Right. Also for me, Shay, like my answer to this is, for me, it's kind of the older ones that people are re-bringing up, because I have been reading historicals for the last 10 years, but it was basically like 4 authors that I was reading. I would just consistently read whatever their new book came out. And I mean, between Eloisa, Julia, Tessa Dare, they have like 1 or 2 books coming out a year. So for the last 10 years, I've just always read those ones coming out. And Catherine Coulter, I used to read her a lot too. But recently, it's been people rereading old books that has talked me into it. So like I read Kingdom of Dreams, The Secret, The Bride, all because people like really hyped those, and people on my channel would keep, like, especially people in the generation older than me who read those books when they came out. I have a lot of my demographic. I have a lot of older watchers just because of, granted, I'm young too, so I'm not calling you old. If you're older than me, I just mean the generation older than me who found me because of Outlander, who would hype these older books for me and be like, you need to read Kingdom of Dreams. You need to read Kingdom of Dreams. You need to read this book. And I'd be like, oh my God, okay, I'll buy it and try it. And then I'd be like, yes, these were perfect. These are wonderful. And I'm sorry it took me so long to read them because you're everything I want. So it's been good. So those are ones I've read for hype were actually older books. Mm-hmm. But so I'll switch this around. What do we think can appeal to contemporary readers about historicals? So what is it about that because I have a lot of people asking me all the time, like, what's a good book for newbies? And I'm like, that could mean anything. Like the first one you could read, I don't know how, like,
well, I think Crystal did a good video about like historicals for newbies, because if you're like me and you're like trying to get into historical romance, or the thing that's keeping you is like the innocence, like the virginal heroines and that type of stuff, Tessa, or like the feminist type things, like if you're worried about that type of thing, Tessa Dare does a really good job, and they can still be funny. I think for me, I was expecting them to be stuffy, and that's why I wouldn't like them, but they can still be funny. They can still be swoony. They can still be dark. They can still be all of those things you like in contemporary romances.
Yeah. I would say that, because I don't know what it is that holds people back. Mm-hmm. Because I'm not the best person to ask. That's why I kind of wanted you on here, is like what the crossover appeal is. And I think that's why because I recently made a video, maybe it's not up yet. Maybe that's why people don't, because I made a historical romance for beginners.
I think you may have. I think I have.
Okay. I have so many videos like pre-made lately that I don't know what I post or not, because I'm going to be out for a few days. So finally, I have a surgery this week. It's on my teeth. So, but I got to get like 6 teeth out, and I'm like, I'm not going to film anything. And yeah, here we go. I like what Bree said. Hi, Bree. We're glad you're here. I think a misconception I had about historical is that they feel really old, but they feel like contemporary is just set in a different time. Mm-hmm. And I think that's especially true about some of the newer ones. Because I'll say, like, there is that group of historicals that they feel of their time. Mm-hmm. You know? And that doesn't mean those ones will be bad. Like, I read The Black Lion and I really liked it. That's by Jude Devereux, but it was really of its time. And whereas I feel like The Bride, that's going to work at any time because it has enough of the funny and it has enough of that stuff. And The Secret, like, that's not a hard book to read. Mm-hmm. And you don't have to have a lot of like deep into historical romance. But like, I'm reading Shanna right now, which is a Kathleen Woodwess. And like, it's written almost like a Pride and Prejudice. Like, it's written like a classic. And so I'm really enjoying the story, but I mean, I'll fully admit, like, the easier the reading, the better for me, because
I think people mistake it for classics. They might think it's written like a classic, because that was probably what was holding me back too, is that they think it's going to be written like a classic novel. But like Tessa Dare's books are so easy to read. And the other thing is, maybe someone just really likes contemporary and they don't even like fantasy. It could be world building, because in historicals, you have to build the world too. I mean, unless you're reading a ton of historicals. I know for me, adjusting to that, I'm like, so what is a duke even? Like, I didn't know. And I didn't know what was like okay for them to do in public. So if you don't know all of that stuff, sometimes it's hard to get your bearings. But once you start reading them, and especially if you start with like those entry level ones, like Crystal suggested in her video, and I'm sure you'll suggest in yours, I think if you start with those, you can kind of center yourself in that world, and then it's easier to move on.
Because that's, for me, like when I made this video, what I was trying to say is, I'm like, to me, it depends on what kind of reader you are, based on what kind of historical you like, because it's like anything else. For me, it's based on like, what kind of books are you reading? So I was like, if you like dark romance, here's where you should start for a dark historical romance. If you like light and fun contemporaries, here's where you should start for that. If you like women's fiction-ish romance, here's where you should start for historical for that. Because whatever it is happening there, they're going to have it in historical.
Right.
And it's going to be awesome. And this crystal, I think, is an absolutely valid thing. I think a lot of people think that, or they think they'll be super flowery writing, where they use the weird words for words. And there are some that do that. There are some that like, they don't, you know, they're still really sexy, but they'll use more like PG-13 words, even though the stuff is happening. I don't know how to say it. But I mean, you get Jennifer Ashley or Kerrigan Byrne in your hands, and I mean, they're telling you everything that's even, you know, do you want BDSM? You want spanking? You want menage? Well, I will find it for you. So let me know.
Exactly.
Let me know. That's what I did in my historical romance by Steam level, because some people want like closed door. But I'll tell you what's not fun is what Crystal said, when you're expecting to have it and then they close the door on your face. And I'm like, don't close the door on my face. I'm a perv. I want to see it all.
I'm a perv. Don't do this to me.
Put me in the sex scene with you. Like, that's what's happening in a book. Like, it's crazy. So I think something too that's different about historical, I haven't really read any of those that are first person. So that's something I think happens with historical. I can't name one besides that's you know, yes, I want the door wide open. Thank you.
Take that thing down.
Thank you, please. So that's like one step away too. I mean, not everyone likes a first person book anyway, but I feel like in contemporary, we find it a lot more often that there's the 2 point of views and you're in first person for them. So you can see what people are feeling and thinking a lot more. But yeah, back to the thing, like when it's for newbies, I really think that you have to like tell me, like specifically when people ask, because I have that all the time. They're like, oh, I want to start. Where do I start? And I'm like, I need you to tell me what you like.
Right.
Like,
well, it's like someone trying to get into romance in general. I need like, what fantasies do you like? What sci-fi do you like? What, you know, like what movies do you like?
Watch? Yeah. Right. What stuff do you want? Like, I mean, people here love books. I don't know how many times someone's come over to my house. One of my friends is like, what kind of book should I read? And I look at them and I'm like,
this is a whole conversation. It's not a one question thing.
Right. Well, what do you want? So then I've had people, I want a book that's kind of like The Wheel of Time. And I'm like, okay, that's a place to start. Let me find it for you. Oh, I want to read a book that's kind of like Aragon. I'm like, okay, I can do that. I want to read a book that's like this, and I'm like, okay.
And then beyond that, you have to ask them, what did they like about that specifically? Right. So what's your favorite book or what's your favorite movie, and what specifically did you like about it? And then you can kind of dig a little deeper. And the historical is the same way. And I think that's probably the misconception, is that they are one-dimensional and there's only one type of historical romance, but it's just as wide of a variety.
Right. Here's a good one. I think some people might think historical will not be able to write interesting women because of restrictions on women. So that's a great thing. Because one of my other questions on here, which I don't quite like how I worded it, so I didn't like bring it up, but what we think is like problematic content. Well, the first thing I want to say is like historical romance, like most romance, is still 95% written by women. And so we're not going to want to write a book where women are all weak and helpless and horrible and everything. So what's fascinating to me about historical romance, and where I see it done a lot, is number one, you often get to see women have pretty unique jobs if they do have a job. Like there were still things that women could do that, you know, they were dealing with a struggle, but is the way that women have their power in a different way. And you will see that like over and over again. Like one thing I'll say for the Kerrigan Byrne, the Victorian Rebel series, we have a woman who works at a police station. We have a woman who's an actress. There's someone who she's a governess and she's on the run. There's someone who she is from America and she's going undercover in Scotland. Like there's just, things can get very creative and interesting, especially if you're reading a book in the Victorian era. Like, if you're reading medieval, the women are kind of, it's more about them trying to like find true romance, in my opinion, and have an equal with their partner, which that's why I don't always suggest people start with a medieval, because there isn't as much freedom of movement, but women weren't like as oppressed in that as you think. They just had their power in different places. Like they're, that's something throughout all time is like laws might have not as been as friendly on the books, but that doesn't mean that every woman was living in depressive, like in a hovel in the corner.
Right.
And I think that's something you have to show people is like, you want to see a woman be strong and powerful. Like they're like us today. Like we find ways to have our power and have it in different ways than that.
And like the little things are almost more impressive. Like the small little defiances that they do, it's just more impressive back then because of how oppressive it was.
And I find something comforting too of sometimes when I read contemporary romances, I feel like women are always like having to be powerful and do this. And sometimes I just want to read a book about a woman that all she wants is to be a wife and a mom and is trying to find true love. And I like the comfort of like, I can read a historical romance and she's not going to be judged for wanting that because that's what they're all trying to do. So that's something that is a thing for me is like, sometimes I just want it to be all we're doing is trying to find love. Because that's what a romance is anyway, but they're not being judged for wanting to do it. It's just like, yeah, I need to find a duke to get married to save my family. Let's do it. And I'm like, here for it.
So Shay asked, which historical author are you intimidated to try?
Sure.
That's a good
I'm
question.
not really intimidated. So I don't know what you think.
I think I'm intimidated by like Johanna Lindsey, like the older books. Like I love the covers and I will collect them for the covers, but I'm a little intimidated to try them.
That's fair. Yeah, I'll retract it. I say that too. The thing that I keep telling myself is there's no way in hell that out of 76 books or so that they all are annoying. Do you know what I mean? Like there's no way. Some people have favorites of her. That's the same view I'm trying to take of Kathleen Woodwise. Like there's no way this woman was writing for how many years and every book will annoy me now. So there's going to be some that leaned into that stuff more than others. And so I want to be willing to try them and find the ones that I like. Because there's some people that Joanna Lindsay's are their favorite. And I want to find those ones. So, oop. Am I still going? I think you froze for me. Hold on, let me take you out. Oop. I don't know what's happening. I don't know. Can you guys still see me or did Bree? Oop, she dropped out. Well, we'll wait till she pops back in there. Let's see. Okay, you still see me. Perfect. Well, we'll just wait here. Let's read through some of these. Top 100 Christmas historical fiction books. So here's like a dirty secret about me. I don't really like books with a theme like that. So I'm not your girl for Christmas recommendations. But I know many, many of my wonderful, loving romance booktubers who do love it. So you will have to look out. I'm sure they will put up some recommendations for her eventually. Let's see which of these are still good. Temptation's Darling. All right. Good, good. Oh, her Wi-Fi died. Okay, she's coming back. Sounds good. A Gentle Feuding was great. Good. And I have a lot of these ones, so that makes me excited. Oop, there she is.
Hi, sorry about that. My internet has been randomly just like stopping every so often throughout the day. It's lovely.
It's all right. I mean, that sucks. That I was like, oh, I'm talking to myself, which I do all the time. So
nothing new here.
Yeah, they were telling me which Joanna Lindsay's they like a lot. Ooh, here's a good one. I love creative ways authors have women rebels in historical, Daring the Duke. Yeah, I've read my first Sarah McLean recently, and it was semi-good for me. Enough that I'm like willing to keep going. So, because I definitely want to read that series. I've heard great things. But the first time I tried The Wicked and the Wallflower, I dropped it pretty quick. So I know. I just wasn't in the right place for the story they were going for, because it was one of those where like, I'm going to make you perfect for somebody else. And I just wasn't in the mood for that one. I was like, nah, I don't want to play this right now. So I'm going to start with her other books and then work my way up to it. And definitely the audiobooks are good. Like, that's the thing too. I've been 90% listening to historical romances because I just love listening to the British voices.
Yeah.
That makes me so happy.
Yeah, I think most of the ones that I've read have been audio.
Yes. Yeah. And that's why, I mean, I had to bite my pride and get back on Scribd again because it's the only place I can like find all of those, because I currently was like paying for everything.
Yeah.
I was buying them all and I'm like, oh, let's see if I can follow the tricks good enough to get some. But yeah, so that was kind of my other thing of, again, we kind of froze in the talk, but how you think like some problematic elements have been handled in historical romance. Because we read a lot of problematic romances anyway, so that's why this is for me when people will say like, oh, there's problems, and I'm like, guys, I read student teacher books. Like, I'm not the right one to ask about because if it's sexy, I don't care if it's bad. Like, one.
I haven't really read any, like, I feel like I haven't read enough to have read one that's like super problematic that I mean, The Duke and I maybe is the closest, which you and I talked about earlier, just because of the consent issue in it. But like we talked about, I mean, you know, reasons.
Right. I'm like, are they happy in the end? Okay. That's how I am about it.
And just like how the story made me feel overall, and was it that jarring? But I think you mentioned in your question something about like, is it worth discussing or talking about? I think it's always worth talking about. And sometimes it brings up good conversations.
Right. That is something that I always defend about, you know, I mean, I did a live show, but we threw together that live show in like 2 hours that one day, because that is why I get so mad when people just throw away a dark romance. Like, it's one thing. It's one thing if you read it and you're like, I can't handle this. Like, I can't read this situation in a book, because you are it is more than valid. Your trigger warnings, whatever they are, whatever it's valid. But to say that a whole trope or a whole genre or a whole anything needs to be thrown out because it has problematic things in it, I get real prickly real fast, because I was like, you don't know which people that this is a coping thing for them, that this is maybe teaching them about it. Like, I don't have any trigger warnings. When I read certain things like this, it teaches me to be sensitive of what someone could have lived through. That is my sensitivity training without having that. And at the same time, if the book makes me happy, I'm still intelligent enough to be like, yeah, this would be a horrible way to treat your partner. Don't do it.
Don't do it, and don't take it. Like, if someone's treating you this way, that's not good.
Smart people learn from their mistakes, but wise people will learn from other people's mistakes. Like, I don't want to do that, you know?
Learn from character mistakes.
Right. If someone's going to be like pulling out and didn't ask, like, no. It's like the opposite problem. Simon has like the opposite problem that all like women today would be. I'm like, dude.
Yeah. Exactly.
18th century probs.
18th century.
You won't let me have an heir. Oh my gosh, I'm just like a goof. All right. I always try to mention content warnings when I see them, even though I may not be triggered. Exactly. Like, that is something I've so learned being part of the romance community, that I feel like it's more respectful than any other community of it, because when you're dealing with sex and love and relationships, the things that can trigger you in that is deeper and darker and more psychological than in any other genre, in my opinion, because when you're dealing with those things, that's where it's closest to the heart, you know?
Right. And especially if you're going in expecting that happily ever after and you're thinking it's going to be all roses, but sometimes there are some scary things that happen. And I wish that, like, I like how Katie Robert in Sacrifice, at least, I don't know if she does it for all of her books, but she lists all the triggers and all the warnings, like, just FYI, this is happening in this book. And then you have, like, I wish that was more commonplace.
Yeah, she does that in the front of every single one. And it's great. I mean, I think it specifically started with her self-pub ones, and with her ones that are traditionally published. I know that she works hard to make sure that they are in them, because she doesn't always have control of everything when it is. That's something we have to remember about like self-pub authors, people, not self-pub, traditionally pub authors, like they don't have control of like even if trigger warnings are put in their books. So, I mean, unless they work it into, if they have an acknowledgement at the front of their book, they could take that control of putting it in there. But like, you know, another plus for self-pub in a lot of ways. But we're kind of like winding down here maybe, but I want to see if anyone else has any other questions. Bree, was there any questions you like had for me or things you wanted to bring up, or yeah.
You answer a lot of the questions that I have in your videos, which is awesome. Like, seriously, that's why I love your videos when you have recs for like very specific recs, especially for historical.
Yeah.
So, and then like beginner's guide type things. Those are always good.
Well, good. Yeah. Whenever I get a trope to do like that, I'm always like, wow, is this like too specific for people? If I'm going to
I don't think so. And I mean, I know you like to always include a lot of books in it, but I think it's okay even if you have just a few for a very specific trope. Like, I almost like feel like you should do rec videos for all the different types of subgenres of historical romance. Like, here's historical romance. I have this element and this element and this element.
Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely working on it. So yeah, because I've done the tortured hero and then the like sexiness word level and like arranged marriage in historical. So I try to work. It's hard to know like where to like pick it different, because I feel like in historicals they do fall into the more basic tropes. Like, whereas contemporary, I feel like you can really like nitpick more. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. But Shay, I think the answer to this is 100% of course, because I buy all the beautiful covers. Like in the month of August, I think I picked up 320 books, and about half of them were historicals, just for so
that's not even historical for me. That's just book buying in general.
True.
I buy a lot and then I don't read them. And then I like listen to an audiobook of a completely different book.
Yeah. What I've kind of done with the, like, unless it's a hyped one that's coming out, right? We were talking about that. Like, I usually only buy the books that I've read already, but I read so many. Like, I mean, you know, I'm reading a lot of books. It's a thing. Hello, my name's
Well,
John.
I don't know. You only read 9?
I know. I am a failure. I just wrote that because it was funny. I was like, guys, I only read 9 books. What? Who am I? Last week I read 20. What am I doing? But like, I try to do that because I want to buy self-pub books. But I know that for self-published authors, from what I've seen, like purchasing their ebook, they actually make more money off an ebook than they do off of you buying the physical, because the physical book, most of it's going to the printing costs. I follow, I can't remember what her name is, but on AuthorTube, she talks about that, like, they get to keep a higher percentage of their ebook purchase than they do of a physical. But usually I'm reading a book on KU, and then if I like it, I'll buy the physical book. So because I mean, you're not really finding those on discounts. Like I search like big hint. Someone told me about Abe books recently, which is enough, like all of them together. Still like Nikki Sloan. I'm obsessed with Nikki Sloan.
I need to read more. Oh my gosh, I read my first one and I loved it.
I know you did. I'm about it. I like can never find her books on sale because they're not. And if they are, it's an ex-library copy. And I'm like, no, I'm to buy a full copy and then have that. So that is the thing of like, I want to support them as much as I can. And I know that purchasing the ebook, they're getting a bigger chunk of it than the physical, but their books are so pretty. I was doing my talk and I was like, besides beautiful historical covers, self-pub books have the best covers.
The best.
Freaking traditional pub is stuck on the cartoon covers and will not get off the train. I'm like, off this.
You know, I don't mind them, but I still love a really, like, Love in the Wild is one of my favorite.
It is
covers.
so beautiful.
It's so gorgeous.
Like Sea of Ruin,
Oh my God, Sea of
How
Rose.
many of us bought that just because it was pretty? Like
I still need the physical copy of that one because it's so pretty.
It's so beautiful. So, I mean, like I'm reading the Hush Notes trilogy with Crystal. Those covers have like the neon on the front of them. They're absolutely beautiful. Like, there's just, because they are tapping into so many different creative people to help them make their covers than a traditional publish. You just have to hand it over. And again, I'm not like completely hating on the cartoon covers because there's some cute ones, but there was that thing like Alexa Dunn. She did this like roasting romance covers where they were literally the same artist had done like 50 covers in the last 2 years, and they just were all the same color and all the same thing. And so I'm like, okay, you as a person who's connected with a publishing house and actually has power with this, can you like tweak your covers a little more so they don't like, they're all the same.
I'm pretty sure that's on purpose though, because they want people to be like, oh, I liked this book. So, and this book looks like it. So let me buy this one. I'm
yes.
sure
And
that's
it's
a marketing
exactly
ploy.
this. Beth the reading wife. That is exactly it too. That's something that I think is an even bigger issue we talked about of like, which book was it that had the big controversy for that? That it had like,
was it The Bride Test or The Kiss Quotient or something?
It might have been those. Which one recently? I feel like Izzy would know this. Which one of those recently that it had like, oh, Meet Cute by Helena Hunting.
Oh yes, that's right.
And it has like tragedy from like
that one was a serious, but and you know you also see Helena Hunting. If you know her, you know she writes a lot of rom-coms. But man, that was a hard-hitting book, and that cover did not match. I thought you meant the ones that had like the cartoon cover and it was like placed in a YA.
Oh no, I mean that happens all the time too. But also, I mean like, because that's not a fault of the author, you know, like the author wrote a contemporary romance and they put some hard-hitting stuff in it, and then you give them this like floofy front because it fits with your theme, but then it's just like this super like hard book to read, like because I feel like it gives me a mindset when I'm reading it.
Like rom-com. I'm expecting a rom-com.
Right. Like I was even thinking that of like reading Spoiler Alert, which is a beautiful cover. Like I love that it's curvy woman on the cover. I love that it tells you a little bit about the story. But every time I would like, every time I was literally reading that book for 8 hours is how I'm reading that book. But I just have that in my head of like, it's supposed to be funner. And this was not like fun. Like I cried the whole way through that book. Like I cried so much.
It was super sweet, but it was emotional.
Right. Yeah, this one too. Beach read.
Yes, beach read.
Yep, beach read. Yeah, one of those for sure. Hey, Melissa, girl. You're awesome. She said she had to wait for the Seahawks game to be over before she could. We were talking about The Crown today because The Crown just came out.
That's valid. You can watch football.
I know. So she's like, I had to wait till this was over before I could do what I want. And I'm like, yeah. I mean, one of the positives on a short list of positives why living alone is okay. Not great during the pandemic, but I guess I get to TV. Sure. But yeah, I don't know. There's just something about.
But beach read, just the title didn't make sense. They weren't even really on the beach.
Was the author like writing a beach read? Is that why it was called that? Like, I don't know. I didn't read it.
I don't know.
I never read it.
Oh, you didn't read it? I don't know. I can't. I don't think. I don't know. I don't remember.
I heard some good stuff, but from the people that mattered to me, I didn't hear that great of a stuff. And because I knew was what the subject he was dealing with, I just don't like to touch. Like grief's not a trigger warning for me, but if it was a lot. Like from what I heard from people, they're like, it's a lot of grief that it is. So
it's an awesome story. The romance was really, really good in it, but yes, the grief was a big part of it.
Right. And that was the thing for me is I was like, I can handle some, but I just don't go to romance to handle grief. So for me, I was like, I'm okay if a book has a little bit of it, but yeah, you were probably one of the people. It was a Michigan beach. Yeah, because it wasn't like a cabin. Like it wasn't like a sunny beach or anything.
Right. And that's, in my mind, well, I'm from Florida. So in my mind, like a beach is like a sunny beach, sand, ocean.
Sure. They're on a blanket. Right. And yeah, it's interesting, but I don't know. And I don't know. I don't read a ton of those except for there's a few authors that I read their contemporary ones. And if I ever get accepted for the arcs, because I'm a glutton for punishment. I always ask for the arc and then I get it, and then I'm like, oh, but I don't really want to read this book. Like that happened with we're devolving now, guys. If you have historical romance questions, go, but I just want to check with you about some of this stuff. So just so you know. We are happy.
Ignore the title of this video at this point.
Right. We have passed that part of it. But what was I going to say? Oh, well played.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand that book. Of like, I don't understand that book.
What did you not like about it?
I don't like catfishing. I mean,
oh yeah, well played. That's what I was thinking of. Well met. Yes, yeah.
No.
I did not.
Also, well met, I didn't like either because again, you closed the door too much, and I was like, they have the sexiest chemistry. Damn, there was such good promise in that, and then I don't know. I'm like, because I'm making a rating scale next year to just help me determine stuff better. Where I'm gonna have hero, heroine, set, just like 4 basic things, and one of them is gonna be like amount of sex in a book. If you promise me that much, you promise me so much. And then there's always like, so here's the pattern with when it's a women's fiction. We have usually great steam level build up. There's lots of tension. And then once we get to the first sex scene, there will then be where there's like a time jump. They'll be like, oh, we were together we were having sex every night. It's happening. And then they'll enter the dark moment.
Yeah.
And so no more sex. And then maybe you get to see makeup sex. So that's the pattern of women's fiction to me. Prove me wrong. I've seen it again and again and again. Like we build up to it, and then we're having lots of sex, but you're not seeing it, and then it's over. And I'm just like, I don't know. But that's just me. I'm dirty. You guys know this. I want it to happen, and I want to see it. And if you promise it to me, and then you immediately have problems, I'm like, I'm not here for this. Like that's most of my thing is like we have sex, and then there's a problem. You know. So I don't know.
I can go either way on it. Like, so, but it just depends. Oh no, am I by myself now? So hi guys, I can't really see the chat anymore. I don't know where Jen went.
I kicked myself.
There you are. I was like, what do I do?
You just wait. Oh my gosh, my finger hit the exit button, so I'm gonna move my hand away. Jeez. Keep going. You can go either way about it. That's what you're saying.
I can kind of go either way. It's so hard for me to say, like, I think we talked about this. It's hard for me to say, like, I don't like this specific thing. Like, I can't say I hate women's fiction because I like I like a couple of Catherine Center's books, and hers are very women's fiction-y.
But I think
me and Jen are in the dirty girl corner.
I think it's fair to say that there's exceptions that prove the rule and still have your rule mostly be one thing. You know? And for me, I've just been proved wrong again and again, where I'm like, I'm left unsatisfied by them. And also what I said about spoiler alert is I can tell it's women fiction focused because even though they were showing us Marcus's point of view, we were very heavily focused on how he needs to change. That book was a lot about how this man needs to change. And even though the heroine like acknowledges she kind of needs to, like she didn't have to do any work. It was all like, he's the one that lied. He's the one that did this. And I'm like, so you get to have reasons for you having a problem opening up to him, but he wasn't trusting you because he wasn't willing to risk his entire career on a relationship that he's had for a month and a half. Like, to me, I'm sorry. Whereas like, it's male problem. And I'm like, that's why I think that gets a bad name sometimes. And it annoys me that they're the ones up for the romance awards on Goodreads. Thank you. Goodreads. You suck balls. Okay. Let's see. Some people are saying something. I hope so, because a lot of people don't seem to realize it's like an extremely heavy book. Oh, were we talking about Beach Reads?
Beach Read.
That's Gus. Gus is his name. Cool beans. Jody. Step back. Oh, somebody know what a step back is? Oh, Jody.
You know what? I didn't for a while too. It was only since like everyone started posting Step Back Saturday stuff. So
here's a good one, Chrissy. Have you ever read an older contemporary? Like,
older contemporary?
Like it was a contemporary book, but like 2005. So it's like
probably. I mean, I've been reading them for so long. I'm trying to think of one.
Yeah. I only really started reading those because that's me, guy. Like if you guys watch my channel from the beginning, which probably you haven't, I only read historical romance or like, and then I read YA fantasy and stuff. So I did not read contemporary romances because I thought they were all women's fiction. It wasn't until I got a Kindle and got KU that I started reading like smutty contemporary romance that I was like, oh, okay, this is great. So that's a funny story. Like I was only reading sex in historical romances. They were my like sexual awakening was sex in historicals. So the people who say they didn't think there would be sex in historicals, that was the only kind that I was reading because I read YA contemporary. I read Sarah Jackson.
Yeah, I read a lot of YA contemporary, not necessarily.
I really liked what's her name? What's her name is I can't remember her name. I read Meg Cabot in contemporary, and
I read back in the day.
Yeah. So those are the ones, but I was reading yes, sometimes women's fiction doesn't have a solid issue. Yeah. Right. Because they don't promise you a romance. And I'm like, no, thank you. I agree with this, Melissa. Absolutely. And that's something about contemporaries of like, I really like the let's be friends with benefits. And then we're like, but I love you and I can't just be your friend. So like, I agree with you about this, which is why I love that trope because I like there to be sex right away, but I too want the connection. So that's why I like, ooh, let's be friends with benefits. But then one of them or both of them is like,
see, for me, it's like, I almost am okay with it if they don't have like a strong emotional connection, as long as they have chemistry. Like if they just have really, really good chemistry and maybe it's not super emotional at first, but if the steam is like really strong between them, then I don't mind it. Like I'm thinking of some novellas that I've read where it's hard to build an emotional connection so quickly. But if you have great chemistry, then I'll buy into that.
But you'll believe that they'll have it later.
Right. That's true.
You'll believe that they'll get to that place. Fair. That's fair. Yeah. Oh, I love all that. I love all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, this was so great. I mean, thank you guys all for jumping on this. I know we devolved from historical romance. I didn't like really come up with a plan, and then Bree was like, "Oh, do you have questions?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I should write some questions."
Well, I was a little scared because I'm like, I don't read a ton. Like, I haven't read a ton, so I don't know how much I can contribute. Right. Which is probably why this conversation devolved.
No, it's all good. I mean, people could ask, there isn't always, I don't know. I just think it's an interesting genre, and I think it's great to see people being drawn into it now, because I think there's a lot of our friends that either they did read it when they were younger and then they like don't read it now, or they have the misconception that it's not as sexy as other books. And I'm telling you, and in fact, I think it's even more when they're repressed a little bit like that, because there's something so sexy about, we don't get to like see, like you don't see people all the time. Like you're not wearing jeans and a t-shirt where you can see everything. There's a lot of like, I'm like opening a present when I get to take off your clothes. I don't know.
Even like if you think about the whole Darcy thing with his hand, like just touching skin to skin is such a big thing. So, and like that stuff can be, that's one thing I remember in Compromised by Kate Noble. There was a lot of that. Like any little thing was just so like filled.
Curl on her face and you're just like, so fun thing to play find it. What's it called? Word search. What am I looking for? A scavenger hunt. Scavenger hunt. In the Viscount Who Loved Me, Julia Quinn wrote a hand flex.
She wrote a hand flex?
5 years before it was in the movie. So Julia Quinn, right? Like it literally, there's a part that says Anthony flexed his hand to keep from touching her. And I was like, Crystal, look at what it's done. And I was like, Anthony's got a hand flex. He's so fun. I like highlighted it. Was like, oh my god, he's hand flexing. Also, she does like someone does a hand flex Friday where like every Friday that hand flex gets posted.
It's such an epic scene.
It's so great. It's so great.
And I have a thing for guys' hands anyway.
Oh, me too.
My husband. So when the first time him and I when we actually hung out outside of work because we met at work, we went and played pool, and with pool your hands are like whatever. And I just remember I was like, Like,
Oh my God.
I was
Yeah.
just staring at his hands the whole time.
Yeah. Yeah. One of my friends is a carpenter. And so he has like, his nails are always blunted and like not dry and cracked, but like they're veiny hands. I just like,
Yeah, because
There's
he's
one-
super tall, so he's got like big, like really long fingers, and it's just like,
yeah. Oh, man, it's so great. It's so good.
I love the
Yeah.
hand flash.
Well, anyway, we'll go ahead and wrap this up for everybody. Thank you so much for joining this.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, I plan to kind of do more of these in the future. We'll see. Maybe it won't always be historical romance. Maybe it will, and I'll just cherry pick people. But Bree, thank you so much for coming here. If for some reason you are a fan of mine and not of hers, you're foolish. You should go find her. She's awesome. My style choices are all in reference to.
I know, like I love the whole look. Where's Crystal?
I know. Crystal too. That's fair. Crystal has a really pretty choker she wears and everything right now. So. Oh my gosh. Okay, last one. This is great. I married a musician for a reason. Oh my
I
God.
am telling you.
Oh my gosh. And on that note, thank you everyone. Have a wonderful evening. Bye.
Bye.